Hello class, this is a really good chapter on governance and financing of elementary and secondary schools. If you read this chapter first and then listen to the lecture, you'll have a better understanding. So hopefully you chose to do that instead of just watching the video. When you slide down into the next page, I made a PDF here, but you can follow me in the book if you wish. And it says right here, by 1921, we may have reached the time when the public will not grant us more money unless we show a greater efficiency in spending. This is something that I have stressed throughout all of our education when we talk about items such as this. And it's this idea that the more money you put into education, finally taxpayers start saying, well, what's our product? The United States alone spends billions of dollars on the military every year, and the product is the greatest and strongest military in the world. But when we say we spend billions on education, do we have the strongest education in the world? And according to national tests and international tests, we are lagging behind some schools, some countries. So this is causing some issues. And as you look at this, it says the organization of the public schools. And the one key word that we have is complexity. The education system in the United States is very complex. There are one person in 5 either goes to a school or works at a school. So 20% of the United States population uses or is employed by an elementary or secondary public school every day of the school year. That is amazing, and that shows you how important our public school system is. Now, of course, because of the chapter of the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, the schools are run by the states. So the states have their own government system for schools. As we look at this, there are 50 separate state education agencies. So every state of the union has their own education system. 13,500 school districts and over 98,000 schools, staffed by 3.2 million teachers. The main people who are in charge of these individual state school systems is the governors, state legislators, state boards of education, and our elected officials. Elementary and secondary education budgets are the largest item on nearly all of the state budgets. So school is always one of the big issues. And that's one of the big counterpoints that our state legislators are always making. Is they're always saying, well, you need to spend more money on education. And they're like, well, the majority of our budget goes to education. Well, the counter to that is, well, education's so big. You know, education is 1 in 5 people in Mississippi go or work at a school. So of course it's going to be a major part of our budget. And education is always that. So you hear this with budget time. And January through March is the big budget time. Our state legislators will meet in January. They begin their session and they start talking about budgets, and they set a budget. They set a budget every year. So right now, no matter what time of the year it is, there generally starts a discussion on what the budget needs to look like. In October and November, there are usually pre-budget meetings, and then everything gets lined up. So really, when they meet in January, they don't meet for the first time. They usually have all their bills ready to go, and they start submitting them and arguing for them. But one thing they always pass is the budget. And this upcoming year, they're talking about more budget cuts. So I'm going to show you a video. It's 2 years old, but it discusses where the Mississippi budget money goes to. And I thought this was very informative, and this guy uses beans to show you. So go ahead and enjoy this video about Mississippi's budget.
In my role as a member of the Mississippi Senate, one of the most important responsibilities that I have to the constituents who sent me to Jackson, in fact to all of the citizens of Mississippi, is to be as transparent as I can be about how we spend a dollar of your tax money. Of course, we get a lot more than just $1. And today I want to take a little time explaining to you in a rather unique way how the Mississippi legislature distributes a dollar of your tax money. It's important information and something hopefully that you will find interesting and informative. As everyone knows, the smallest denomination of currency or coinage in the United States monetary system is a penny. Well, actually, that's not small enough for me to use in this demonstration. So I've got a rather unique way of explaining today. We're going to use kidney beans. And a kidney bean is going to represent 1/100th of a penny. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of numbers, big numbers today, but I do want you to know that the fiscal year 2016 general fund budget for the state of Mississippi is $5,698,850,240. One kidney bean for this demonstration is going to represent $569,000. These are expensive little beans. Now, let's talk about the budget. There are many different state agencies for which the state of Mississippi funds. It would take entirely too long to itemize each one of those agencies, so we've divided them into 15 groups. The first is the executive group. This includes the governor's staff, the mansion, and the State Ethics Commission. Their budget is $3.3 million, representing 0.05% of the state budget. So we're going to put 5 kidney beans in their cup. That represents the first expenditure we're making of your tax dollar. Next comes miscellaneous. Every budget has a miscellaneous grouping, and ours does too. It's kind of a catch-all where we put items and agencies that are not otherwise defined. $11.7 million or 0.21%. So 21 kidney beans are going in the next cup. The next grouping where we spend a portion of your tax dollar is the legislative branch of government. $28 million is appropriated in fiscal year 2016 to pay the salaries, traveling, housing, and other expenses of running our legislature, including all of the staff and employees that work at our Capitol. $28.12 million. It represents 0.49% of the total state budget. The next grouping of where we spend your state tax dollar is in the area of public health. $37.9 million or 67/100% of the state budget goes to public health. 67 kidney beans. Let me tell you a little bit about what we do with public health money. We inspect the restaurants that you eat in. We make certain that your drinking water is safe. The Department of Public Health is responsible for issuing certificate of needs for public hospitals, nursing homes, and major pieces of equipment. It's one of our most important agencies, and it represents 67/100ths of your tax dollar. Next is conservation. This is a large grouping that includes the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, the Forestry Department, the Waterway Commissions, the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, Marine Resources, and the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. We fund these agencies with a total of $53.2 million. It represents 93/100ths of a cent of your dollar. So we're going to put 93 kidney beans into this bucket. Next is fiscal affairs. This is the accounting department for the state of Mississippi. Just like any business that spends the kind of money that the state of Mississippi does in running all of our agencies, it's important that we have an accounting department. And now we're going to start talking about some real money. Here's actually a real coin. 1 penny, 1.19% of your tax dollar goes to funding fiscal affairs. The total budget is $68 million. 1.19%. This includes the State Auditor's Office, the Department of Finance and Administration, as well as the Department of Revenue. Continuing to spend your tax dollar now brings us to the Judiciary and Justice Department of state government. That budget appropriation totals $74.4 million or 1.31% of your tax dollar. This budget includes the Supreme Court, the Appeals Court, circuit courts, chancery courts, district attorneys, and the Mississippi Attorney General's office. The next area where we spend your tax dollars is in the area of homestead exemption. In this particular case, you get some of your tax dollars back. $84.4 million are appropriated by the state legislature to reimburse counties for the homestead exemption that each of us enjoy on our personal property that we live in. This represents 1.48% of our state budget. And again, it's money in your pocket. The next area of our state budget that we fund with your tax dollar is military, police, and veterans affairs. In this day and age, we're all so importantly aware of the role that our police, our military, and our veterans play for the state of Mississippi. We fund these agencies with $98.7 million. It represents 1.73% of your tax dollar. It includes the National Guard, the Veterans Affairs Board that provides nursing homes and veteran counselors in each of our 82 counties. It includes the Highway Patrol, the Bureau of Narcotics, as well as the Law Enforcement Academy, where all of our police officers and law enforcement officials are trained in the state of Mississippi. 1.73% of your tax dollar goes to support these important areas. Next is agriculture and economic development. For years, agriculture has been the most important economic product in the state of Mississippi. This budget item includes funding the Mississippi Department of Agriculture. It also includes funding for the Mississippi Development Authority. Is the agency that is responsible for recruiting new industry and business to the state of Mississippi. $120.6 million, or 2.12% of your tax dollar, goes to support agriculture and economic development in the state of Mississippi. The next item is the Department of Mental Health. This is an extremely important agency as well. There are 24 different hospitals and mental health centers spread across the state of Mississippi, providing services and benefits for those families who are facing the difficulty of having family members who are dealing with mental issues. Again, the total appropriation for the Department of Mental Health is $226.4 million, or 3.97% of the total budget of the state of Mississippi. As we all know, it is important for us to have an effective and safe correction system in the state of Mississippi. This is an expensive item in our budget, but it's a very necessary item. We spend $330 million this year making certain that those who are housed in our several Department of Correction institutions are housed and fed each day. It costs you, the taxpayers, $330 million to provide this for our incarcerated citizens. Even so, that is a $13 million decrease from last year. It represents 5.84% of the fiscal year 2016 budget. Let's put those pennies in a bucket. 5.84%. Just like every business and industry doing business in the state of Mississippi and across the United States, and for that matter, just like every family watching here, when there's a large ticket item, we have to go to the bank and borrow money, whether it be an automobile or our home, or operating monies for businesses, but especially for capital improvements. We have a lot of capital improvements that go on in the state of Mississippi, and to finance those improvements, we issue bonds. Bonded indebtedness in the state of Mississippi is very important, and each year we pay back part of that indebtedness. In fiscal year 2016, we will pay $392.7 million toward principal and interest of money that we have borrowed in past years to make necessary improvements. The total appropriation in the fiscal year 16 budget for debt service of the state of Mississippi is $392.7 million, representing 6.89% of your tax dollar. This brings us to a most significant point in the expenditures of your tax dollar. We're about to cross the $1 billion expenditure, and it goes in the area of social welfare. This includes Medicaid, human services, and rehab services. As a civilized society, it's important for us to provide for those less fortunate than others. The state of Mississippi does that by appropriating $1.08 billion to social services. That represents 18.95% of your tax dollar. And now we come to the final area of appropriations for the 2016 fiscal year budget. To no one's surprise, this is public education, and it includes everything from K-12 through the institutions of higher learning. The total budget appropriation in fiscal year 2016 is $3.09 billion for public education. That represents 54 pennies and 16 beans. 54.16% of your tax dollar goes to support public education. Just as it should be. There is no greater responsibility that any legislature has than to provide for the education of our children. Last year, revenue for the state of Mississippi grew by $110 million. What did the legislature do with that money? Well, $106 million of that $110 million went to K through 12 public education. Other agencies that's represented on this table saw their budgets remain the same and in some instances actually cut. We provided an additional $106 million for K-12 education. The legislature has been criticized for not fully funding K-12 education using the MAEP formula. Instead of the $106 million that were provided, the public education lobby, or some areas of it, criticized the legislature and said they should have received an additional $201 million using the MAEP formula. Sitting before you on this table is where the legislature spent its budget last year and appropriated it. Now let me ask you a question. If you were a member of the Mississippi legislature, where would you consider coming up with approximately $200 million additional dollars from the cups that I've shown you this morning to put in this last cup? The first 6 categories in our state budget. We have the executive branch, which is the governor's office, the Arts Commission, the Ethics Commission, the Wireless Communications Commission, the legislature, public health, forestry, the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, Soil and Water Conservation, DEQ, DMR, Archives and History, the Department of Revenue, the State Auditor's Office, and the Department of Finance. Comes up to $202 million. So we actually have enough money in these first 6 cups. The problem is that leaves a big void in services provided to the state of Mississippi by the legislature. The truth of the matter is the legislature has been doing an excellent job in funding all of our state agencies as well as public education. Make no beans about it, it's the most important responsibility that we have. But we believe that giving money to the classrooms and the kids that are sitting in those classrooms is far more important than adding jobs at the administrative level. I hope this has been helpful to you today. If you'd like a copy of our state budget, I'll be happy to send you one. Simply write me at the address shown on your screen, and we'll send you a copy of the fiscal year 2016 budget. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.
The video was a little bit longer, but by watching that 15 minutes, you definitely are more educated on the Mississippi budget. I definitely get tired of people making the argument that education in Mississippi takes up so much of the budget. Well, yes, it does, and you can see why it does. But the counter is, it does because the education system in Mississippi is so large. 1 in 5 people are employed or go to a school. So of course the budget's 50%. And then nowadays there's been this big pushback to, if we're going to give you all this money, what are you giving to us in return? And that's usually in the form of grades and passing school districts. One key word is public education in the United States is a highly decentralized endeavor. It is definitely decentralized. And because when you look at the schools, the first thing you always see is called the school board. The school board is generally elected 5 to 7 members. 95% of school board members are elected. So they're usually elected. You can look at requirements for school board members. Generally, it's a high school diploma and not being convicted of any kind of felony. School boards usually set policies. They'll listen to transfer issues. They do talk about the budget. They look at the organizational pattern, but they mainly rely heavily on the spokesperson of the district, and that is the superintendent of schools. The superintendent can be looked at as the CEO of the school district. This person is responsible to communicate standards and curriculum and education policies to the school board in terms that they can understand. So you definitely need a school board superintendent who is political, who can handle talking to people. You're talking to school board members who do not understand some higher level curriculum standards and terminology. So they have to be able to do that. You need a person who is kind of a middleman, or a woman, obviously, who's a middle person who can do all of these elements. I use the word man as an ambiguous term, but predominantly 75% of superintendents are male, 25% are female. There's a large number of whites compared to African Americans, so that we do need to have more diversity as our CEOs. Why is that? I do not know, but we definitely need more diversity in our superintendents, obviously. One study showed that the average superintendent worked 60 hours a week. It's a lot. I'll show you a video of an elected school board superintendent. This was before most school board superintendents are now appointed in Mississippi, but this is them talking about who's going to be running for superintendent.
My name is Robert Smith. I'm a candidate for Superintendent of Education, Lee County Schools. I have 32 years experience in education. I have 23 years in Lee County, 18 years as a high school principal. I have a deep concern for Lee County schools after being in the school systems and being involved in schools for 32 years. I think we can do better by what we have right now and what we're doing. We have great teachers in this county. We have great resources, community support, and I think we need to make sure that we make those strides to get our schools back up at the top where our kids deserve to be and our schools deserve to be.
I'm Jimmy Weeks. I'm the Superintendent of Education for Lee County Schools. I'm continuing to campaign for the office of Lee County Superintendent because over the last 4 years, we've started a lot of good things in Lee County schools, and I want to be there to see them through.
The superintendent, the second one, the guy with the facial hair, he's actually one, in case you're curious. But anyway, let's continue on. The school district budgeting and the building principal. The building principal is the person who's in charge of, obviously, the education that goes on within the building. An effective principal, there's all types of discussions on what makes an effective principal. There are different types of leaders in schools, and you'll meet those throughout your career. There's the my way or the highway, the cooperative one. There's the one who's never there. There's the one who's very micromanaging. And you as a employee and as a teacher, you're going to have to find out what kind of principal that works best for you. And that's what many research doesn't talk about. They always say, what's the best boss and what's the best boss for every. The best style is a cooperating boss. And I disagree with that. I think that every boss is unique and every boss has different styles. And you as an educator, you need to find out what kind of boss works best for you. Now, of course, if you get a bad boss, a boss that doesn't mesh with you. See, some people like a boss who tells them what to do. And some people like a boss who's never there. And some people like positive reinforcement. So that depends on you. But if you get a boss who doesn't mesh with your style, and that's a principle that's going to really affect your job, and what are you going to do? Are you going to just stay there as long as you can and hopefully they'll stay? Or how are you going to mesh with that? And that's something that's something that you're going to have to determine on your own. Combine that with what we talked about in the first couple of chapters of this semester a long time ago, and that's 55% of school teachers quit after the first 5 years. You see that a good mesh, a good cooperation between the principal and the teacher is important for the first 5 years. Now, somebody says, well, how does that work? But when you interview for a job, you definitely need to interview the principal as well. You need, while he's asking you questions, you need to see if you can kind of understand what his leadership style is. And when he asks you or she asks you what kind of questions you have, you might want to tell her, well, can you explain to me your style of teaching, of being a principal? What do you expect from an employee? And if they say, I just expect you to work, or I expect you to, you know, are you going to mentor me? Are you going to help me? That's something that you might want to look at. Budgeting of schools, school district budgeting. School district budgeting, if you read this paragraph and the next paragraph, the main thing is the word ongoing. It is a very ongoing process. Budgets are always changing in education because income is based on students who attend, and that comes down from the state. So you may have students who miss a lot because of the flu, so that's going to cut back on money. So budgets are always flexible and they're always moving. There are hardline budgets, and a school principal, like a position in the school, has to, and that teacher's going to make $35,000, so that's a hardline budget. But then you have science projects and science fairs and athletics and football and gate. You might have a bad football team, and you go, well, you know, what's a football team matter? Well, you know, for example, a $5 admission for a Meridian High School, and they get 3,000 people to come watch their game versus South Panola. Well, that's $15,000. That's $15,000 at the gate. So the football officials are going to cost you around $200 to $300, or $500, we'll say, and security is going to run you another $500. So you spend $1,000 and you've made $15,000, so you've netted $14,000. Now your concession stands also bring you in around $2,000, so you've made $16,000. Well, the soccer team is going to have a budget of about $3,000 or $4,000, and the tennis team is going to have a budget of about $1,000. So what that means is one football gate, one great football game with 3,000 people has actually paid for soccer, tennis, probably basketball as well, and baseball. That's a budget that's going to, all that in one football game has paid your entire athletic budget for all the other teams. So that's why the budget is flexible. You could have a bad gate night. You could have a bad football team for a whole year, and that budget gets knocked down, and then what are you going to do? And that's something that's definitely, all those issues are resting on the shoulders of the principal. Now, the next thing right here is talking about charter schools, and I'm going to show you a video on charter schools.
More than 1 in 3 public schools in the state of Mississippi are ranked a D or an F on the school rating system from A to F. So that means that when students are walking out the door heading to their school, whether they're starting in kindergarten or middle school or high school, they have a greater than 33% chance of going to a failing school, and those odds are unacceptable.
The state of education feels very divided. It feels very much like the have and the have-nots. And what I saw in the people that I met when I first came down was a desire to change that and to say that it doesn't matter your zip code, it doesn't matter which part of Jackson or Mississippi you live in. We want to provide an excellent education and to prove what's possible for those families.
The words "a long time coming" come to mind. I mean, I've always been a believer that no child should be trapped inside a failing school because their parents couldn't afford to live in a better neighborhood. So just to have that opportunity and be a part of this historical process, it's the honor of my life.
The first charter school in Mississippi is a BES school, part of the Republic Network that was started in Nashville.
One of my joys is taking visitors down to the school and standing in the back of a classroom and letting them watch the students and the teachers interact and watching their reaction. It is, it's inspiring. It's the only way to describe it.
I think what's exciting for someone who joins BES and chooses Mississippi means that you get to still be among the first. You still get to be one of the first people to come to a state that is just crying out for more support, for a state that is begging for someone to show what excellence looks like, and to be able to join, to be a part of BES and be the founder of Reimagine and the first charter school in the state. I would love to be able to share that with more people.
We definitely need more charter schools in Mississippi. Some days it's hard to come to work because I'm like, I wish all children in Jackson could come here. I see scholars walk into the local elementary or the local middle school, and I hear of traumatic events that are occurring, and I'm like, I wish we could take all of the children in Jackson. So Mississippi definitely needs more charter schools, and most importantly, people who are passionate about doing the work and getting their hands dirty and, you know, giving their lives to the betterment of scholars in Jackson, Mississippi, and Mississippi in general.
If you choose to join the fellowship and open another charter school in the state of Mississippi, you will have an army of support behind you. There is a team, an informal team of charter champions, all of whom are looking for great people to do this work. And if and when you raise your hand and want to be that person, we will be there paving the path for you and supporting you every step of the way.
I think the people are great, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I think that there are a lot of people who are willing to put in the time and put in the effort. It's just like every community in the Delta, there are a lot of great people, there are a lot of big challenges, and I think what we need are just folks who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do whatever it takes to improve the quality of the community.
Our goal is not to just affect the lives of the students in these schools. It's to affect the lives of all the children, show the people, the parents of Mississippi, what is possible for their children.
When I grew up, I wanted to be a nurse practitioner, or I wanted to go to culinary school.
I'm going to go to Harvard. Then it's going to be the White House and the Oval Office, because I'm going to be president.
If we create an amazing group of schools here and we are able to prove what is possible in Mississippi, it could change the entire country in education.
All right, so you know what a charter school is, and there was a big movement for that a couple of years ago. What a charter school is, and I'll make it as easy as possible, because you can also read about it. A charter school is when the state of Mississippi or a state grants the charter or the right to have a school to a private entity, but they give the entity public school tax money. So that's what a charter school is. It's good for the state because the state gets to regulate and control that, and also the charter school can run the way they want to run. They can bring in religion if also, but also it's good for the state because it gets away from the public retirement system. The charter school is going to be doing private 401ks with their employees. Very controversial to say the least, and there's been a lot of movements for and against charter schools. We have a couple in Mississippi. They're not growing at the rate that they want them to, and they're real hesitant to give out those charters. And there's been a big stress on how much they need to and how much they don't need to. You need to give them more charters, they'll say. And every year there's a couple of charter schools that can apply. Number of charter schools in the United States, you can see it's growing, so there are more charter schools in Mississippi. Let's get down here to, this is something I wanted to show you. State Board of Educations, we know about that. The State Superintendent of Education, and right here. And this is the number of regular school districts and estimated fall enrollment for public schools. And if you look at Mississippi, Mississippi has 150 school districts, and that's ranking them as 32nd. Okay, but if you also look at enrollment, which is 492, what that means is for every 3,200 students, we have a school district, basically. So every 3,200. Now, who's got the most school districts? Well, Texas does. Texas has 1,000 school districts for 5 million students. But that is one for every 5,000 students. So Mississippi actually has more school districts per student than the number one state, which is Texas, when you look at the ratio. Mississippi has a lot of school districts, and maybe we need to get away from that one. Of course, if you look at the chart, which one has the fewest, that would be Hawaii. At this time, you do not have to do the homework assignment. You do not have to do the homework assignment if you email me the word no homework, the words no homework. And that's it. That means you listen to the lecture. Everyone else will do the homework assignment. Of course, that does not exempt you from the final exam, but the homework assignment will be on the email. And then if you just send me the email, send me a thing that says no homework, that means that you listen to the lecture, and everyone else will be doing the homework assignment because they didn't listen to the lecture. So that'll be your little secret and your reward for listening to the lecture. All right, so as we continue on, we look at federal government and public education. The federal government gives a lot of money. And then one thing it talks about federal grants and items such as that. But I really want to get down here to the local money, and that's the financing of education. And the financing of education is done on multiple levels. And one thing is it talks about equity and adequacy and full state funding and flat grants and all those items like that. But the number one local source of tax revenue is property tax, and property tax is the number one. But we always use, we use the term millage rate. So I'm going to show you a video that tries to explain to you millage rate, and you see if you can understand it.
Hi everyone, my name's Nick Mercier. I'm the president of the Citizen Property Owners Association of New Britain, and I'm here today to do a little video called What is a Mill Rate? A mill rate is something you hear about in the newspapers a lot of the time, but not a lot of people know what it is, so I'm going to try to clear that up for you today. So you can think of the mill rate or the tax rate as this kind of machine, almost like it's this giant, massive grinding machine that the government has, municipal government has. And what they do with this machine is they take all sorts of property, things that you own, like your house or your car, or even something like your swimming pool, which is part of your property taxes, and they put in this machine, and out the other end comes money, lots and lots of money, tax dollars. This is how the government turns your property into taxes that they use for roads and potholes and things like that. So the mill rate is equal to the tax rate. That means if you had a mill rate of, say, around 26, that would mean your tax rate is 2.6%. So if you had a $2,000 car, you multiply that by a 36.63 mill rate, which was the mill rate in 2012, that means you would owe $73.26 in taxes. You take that same car, you multiply it by a 44.12 mill rate, the mill rate in 2013, and you can see your taxes go up to $88.24 on your tax bill. So how can the mayor claim that taxes haven't gone up if the tax rate has gone up? Well, as the tax rate has been going up, property values have been going down. So even with the higher tax rate, your overall tax bill may not have changed. Here's how. So you have a house in 2012 that's worth $100,000. You multiply that times a 3.663 tax rate, and you find that you have a tax bill of $3,663. You take that exact same house in 2013, and now it's only worth $83,000. You multiply that times a 4.412% tax rate, and you get the same tax bill. But it's not the same tax rate. Everybody can tell you the simple truth. 4.412 is a bigger number than 3.663. Everyone knows that. My 3-year-old son knows 4 is bigger than 3. But what if you don't care? Your tax bill's staying the same even though the tax rate goes up. How does it affect you? Well, the tax rate affects what businesses come into New Britain. Businesses aren't attracted to a city when the tax rate is perceived to be too high. It affects your car taxes because even if your home goes down in value, your car really doesn't as fast. And it affects the sale price of your home. If your house is worth less and you're planning on retiring with money from selling your house, well, it's going to be sitting on the market for a long time. These are all bad things. Well, I hope this helps you understand the mill rate a little bit better and how it affects your life directly and indirectly. Please check us out online at cpoanb.org, follow us at Twitter at cpoaofnb, or find us at facebook.com/cpoanb.
All right, so millage rate is confusing because, and you saw that in the video, and I don't want to have to reteach what you just saw, but millage rate is based on appraised property value and also millage rate. And you can see how millage rate can go down and property value goes up and you still pay more taxes. Simple as that. There's all different ways that people can make money. School districts have a state sales tax. The number one way, of course, is the property tax. And the chapter ends up with talks about private schools and private education and homeschooling, which is also an option as well. And you'll see those elements as well. This is a very good chapter. If you read it, it talks about the governance. Read this chapter, please, or if you have read it, thank you for reading it. So where are we going at this point? On this email, you saw the homework assignment, so that'll be for your points for this week. And then I'm also going to email everyone the final exam. And that'll be that. And then everything will be done. So thank you for listening to the lecture, and I hope you have a good day.